Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Swim Brief, another edition of Story Time with Krista Sanis, where I just sort of start telling some stories about a topic, and hopefully it'll weave into something that's relevant to you. Earlier this week, I shared a post to my Instagram, and the post was essentially talking about what I call the genetic free ride. And I'm going to tell a little story about that, talk a bit about it, because I can see that this topic really resonated with a lot of people that listen to this podcast or follow me on social media. And I actually find it a very interesting subject. And, that's sort of the qualifications for something appearing on this podcast. This is actually a topic that I've been thinking about for a long time. I went back, I had quite a popular blog about this back in the day when I didn't do audio essays like this, when I actually sat down as the people did in olden times and wrote something down that you could read. And I'll link to that below. The post is titled "What to Do When the Genetic Free Ride Ends." And originally I wrote it in January 2017. So we're talking about something that's more than 5 years. I've felt confident enough in what I've thought about it to put it out there. So I've probably been thinking about it for, 15, 20 years, if I'm being totally honest. And I just, as always, when I do these things, I want to admit from the outset that I'm not an expert in physiology. I'm not an expert in biology. I'm not an expert in childhood development. So pieces of this are things that I probably don't understand the details of very well, but I can see already from the way this topic is filtering around that it's one of those things that I think a lot of coaches, even though they might not understand all the underlying science, they really do understand it intuitively because they have seen it over and over and over again. So let me just get into a little bit of a definition of what I consider to be the genetic free ride and why it's so important. And I think it's certainly, I've been thinking a lot about other sports. Again, I'm not an expert in other sports. I'm going to try to learn a little bit more in the near future about other sports, but swimming is where I've spent the overwhelming majority of my time sport-wise, and I can see that it's extra relevant in the sport of swimming, and I'll talk about that after I finally get to the definition of the genetic free ride. So to me, when almost everybody starts swimming, they're going to start swimming typically at a prepubescent age, an age when they are growing a lot, right? They are very naturally getting bigger, getting stronger. And this means that regardless, and I have observed this many, many times, regardless of whether they really do anything that is relevant on an even playing field to getting better in the sport of swimming, they will get better, right? The time's on the clock. Like you could essentially not practice from age, say, 11 to 14 and definitely improve. Like I would venture to guess that especially an untrained swimmer that didn't train, like wasn't training at 11 and then continued not training through 14, they would be significantly faster at age 14, right? So this is what I mean by a genetic free ride, the normal process of physical maturation will make a big difference because how tall you are and how strong you are has a giant impact in how fast you can swim races. That's why when you look at the Olympics, there are really tall, really strong people for the most part, even breaststroke, which is sort of the one exception. And I'll get into that a little bit more as well. Why, in terms of, height being an overwhelming advantage, the people that do extremely well in breaststroke are insanely strong, right? So you can't even, if you can maybe parse out the variable of height, but not strength, And in general, people, as they physically mature, especially up through puberty, are going to continue to get taller, and they're going to continue to get stronger. Now, this will be a little bit different for boys versus girls, because girls will, on average, again, I'm not an expert in this field, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to hit puberty on average a little bit earlier. And in the years that they're experiencing puberty, they're going to get less of a relative strength boost that boys will get. So in that sense, I think the big distinction here is that the genetic free ride for boys lasts a lot longer. Like, I would venture to guess that some aspects, like some really strong aspects of it, last for many, many years beyond. Again, not an expert in the subject. I'm not going to get into like venturing a specific guess for a year that the genetic free ride ends for boys. And why is this important? Well, they're like, gosh, this is important on so many levels. Oh, let me say what I was going to say earlier before I get into why it's important, of why I think especially size and strength are so important in the sport of swimming. It's because I think swimming in general, culturally, is extremely sophisticated in the way that we can train people, that we can train up their physical systems to sort of to bear on swimming races. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we are, like, swimming is a very unnatural movement for people. People aren't, like, human beings are, I don't think, are natural swimmers. We're not dolphins, right? We don't instinctually know what to do when we get in the water. So it's extremely, extremely physically demanding to swim, especially when your skill level is lower. Like, anybody who's good at swimming can say, like, it's actually a challenge in a certain respect to get a workout swimming, whereas you probably have people that are non-swimming people in your life that can get a great workout from swimming because their skill level is so low that they can get in, and just swimming to the under end of the pool spikes their heart rate. No matter how hard they try, it's just such a hard task to get to the other end of the pool that they can get a very, very intense workout from swimming. Whereas the higher your skill level goes up, the harder it can be. But we're very sophisticated about knowing where the line is, and that's why, especially high level swimmers, I think, train a ton. Okay, and the other thing about this is, I want to say this in an optimistic kind of way, and I'm struggling a bit to find the word, so excuse me for going through this. I just think, probably based on the current paradigm, the sort of current knowledge base in swimming, being like a very, very high level teacher of swimming skill doesn't make a big difference in how well people swim. It doesn't mean that it's not important to be a high level teacher of skill. I think in general, swim coaches are outstanding at skill instruction. If you go back to what I said at the beginning, and maybe this has to do with why being outstanding among the outstanding doesn't really help you very much. And I'll get to that in a second. I'm reminding myself, my ADHD is reminding me of so many points that I want to get to later. Let's see how organized I stay through this whole story time. But the skill level that that swim coaches can get people up to on something that people are naturally really, really unnatural at, that's really, really challenging for them, is incredible. When you just think that, like, your average swim coach can just take a kid essentially that's afraid to put their face in the water, and probably within a year get them to doing butterfly to the other end of the pool. That is incredible. Like, and I think most swim coaches, this is a thing that they don't realize about themselves, that they're literally like a magician and a wizard. The things that they can do are, when you step back from the swimming world and go like, well, yeah, everybody can do that. No, not everybody can do that. You're amazing. You're amazing in that respect. And maybe that's one of the reasons that being good at skill instruction doesn't help you so much, because it's like, on average, swim coaches are extremely good at teaching people how to do this unnatural thing. So if you're the best at it, it's not that much. It's not a dramatic difference from your average swim coach. Like it looks, we perceive it as a dramatic difference, but it's a difference between a billionaire and somebody with a net worth of $900 million. Like, yeah, $100 million is a lot of money, but at a certain level, like, what else can you spend on? Right. And so that is probably why also I think, if I bring it all the way back to the genetic free ride, it's worth investing, or people in general invest a lot into the training of swimming, and why these factors that essentially are like free training for developing swimmers make such a giant difference. What are some of the implications of this? Well, a couple ones. There's one for coaches, big one. There's one for swimmers. And you can't really extract the two from one another, because those two people are working in cooperation. For coaches, I think it makes it extremely difficult to evaluate with physically maturing swimmers what is going on developmentally. Like, you cannot rely on, yeah, they're improving, so they must be doing the things it takes to improve. They will improve no matter what, almost no matter what. There's always exceptions, no black or white, right? But they will improve almost no matter what. And so you could be doing a ton of things wrong, and your swimmers are going to see improvement on the clock. The swimmers could be doing a ton of things wrong, and they're still going to see a ton of improvement on the clock. And most coaches, the overwhelming majority of coaches, are coaching people that are on a genetic free ride. So, most of us have that issue, and most of us, if you're not one of those people, you're probably in charge of evaluating the people who are coaching people who are on a genetic free ride. And you have to figure out, is this person doing a really good job? And you can't just look at it like you might look with somebody who coaches physically mature swimmers and go like, well, are they developing those people or not? Right. You have to have other systems for doing it, or you have to be smarter than me and have some sophisticated way of figuring out what is it, like quantifying the genetic free ride and essentially figuring out, are people exceeding that or not? Now, I promised, to get to the swimmer piece of it too, that's actually where my level of expertise comes in, because I think this has a tremendous psychological impact on swimmers. And it bleeds into their motivational structure, because very tangibly improving, being able to see those times on the clock, that is a wonderful experience. It feels really good. And that's how most people get started in the sport. And I think probably on a certain level, we want them to get hooked into that, right? Like that sort of self-improvement vein. But I don't see a tremendously coordinated, organized way of communicating about what it looks like when that process, that invisible free ride ends. And so swimmers are faced with like a perception that, At some point, they were doing things right. That, because they make that, it's a totally normal human thought to say, like, I'm improving right now, so what I'm doing must be right. And then having it stop and then go, then it sort of question. Yeah, at that point, they have to question their entire worldview, right? Was I doing everything right? Am I doing everything right? What's wrong now? What's different? I think I've referenced this obliquely in other posts. I think, there's for sure an existential crisis I've observed with a lot of female swimmers where it's sort of like, well, if only I could be prepubescent again, and I think that has definitely some correlation to disordered eating and body image issues, because it's simply not possible to reverse puberty. But it's a really, really, really challenging time. And unless you're prepared for it, it can really, really knock you for a loop. Now, I promise this was story time. I literally haven't told a story this whole time. So let me actually get to a freaking story, guys. I'm so sorry. And probably why I am particularly obsessed with this issue. Okay, I started swimming at the age of 9, competitive swimming. And I've told this story in some other formats, so I'm going to yada yada over the beginning of it, a little bit, just to get you to the part that's relevant to what we're talking about today. I started swimming with my best friend. He was better than me at every sport. He quit after 3 weeks. I think I was put on, probably the 8 and under group, even though I was 9, because I was so behind, which is a funny thing to think about now. That my daughter's almost 9. So I was behind, and they sort of put me there, and like, oh, I guess he'll, figure it out. I remember being really, really terrible in all the practices that I was having. I think I was swimming 3 times a week, 2 hours, which is an insane amount to swim when you hadn't been doing any competitive swimming. And I had years where, relative to my peers, I was really, really bad, like literally getting last in meets, not like one of those fake modest things where you say, yeah, I was bad. It was legitimately below average in the competitions that I was taking place in, but I would improve a lot. And that was what sort of kept me in it. And then I had this experience of, at the age of 14, and I say this not because I'm some 39-year-old guy holding on to his age group victories, but I won an event at my LSC age group championship when I was 14 years old. And so I had this experience of being a good age grouper. It was probably better than good. It was a great age group swimmer. So I went from, like being relatively bad to being relatively great. And then I just sort of like watched the next few years as my peers that I had beaten at age 14 just kind of swam on by me. I think I beat a guy who went on to swim for, University of Virginia, when Virginia's men's team was dominant ACC team. So obviously he got a lot faster from that point. And I essentially stagnated in that event, particularly. In some of the other events, I did improve over time. And there's a whole nother lesson about what to do in this situation, I think, from that, because I think, like swimmers can almost like imprint on an event the first thing that they're successful in, and that's my event. And like, I need to keep doing that when that's not really how development works. You kind of improve over here and then you improve over here. That's why it's good to keep a broad event set in whatever you're doing. But it was really, really challenging for me, because I think at that moment, if I could put myself back in my 14-year-old shoes, I was like, wow, this is such a great accomplishment. It's because I work so hard and I do X and Y and Z. And like, I really connected all the process of what I was doing with what happened. And then it just kind of stopped. And I didn't know what to do. And I think in retrospect, I spent a lot of the rest of high school kind of floundering around, trying to get a foothold on something that would help me progress forward. I found something late in in my career. Although, again, most of the stuff I improved on later in life was like I got better at shorter races, which is pretty normal. If I'm being honest about my own development, like boys get stronger. You're stronger at age 22 than you are at 14. So you should be better in a short race. And in some of the longer stuff, like just sort of stayed the same. And so I probably have been thinking about that since then. I hope that listening to this story and listening to some of this discussion helps you to communicate a bit better wherever you are about the genetic free ride. If you have a story to tell about this, or you've got some information you think would be relevant to the conversation, jump in the comments. I keep asking, but I know you guys are going to get there eventually. I love to hear from you. And I will be checking back for that on YouTube. If you want to follow me for more positive psychology based content, Instagram, Christy_coach, Chris DeSantis Coaching on Facebook, and check below too for some links to that old blog post. And if you're more of a reader, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you again soon.